to our first in-person slash hybrid meeting in several years. I have basically one order of business, which is to turn your microphone on. There is a button on the bottom that says push, and if the light is red, then your microphone is on. Please use your microphone to make sure everybody can be heard. And other than that, it's great to see you all in person, and we can get started on the agenda.
Okay, the first agenda item is the Arlington resident study and information on Can you all hear us?
I can hear you now, Bridget.
Thank you. Sorry. So I actually welcome the commissioners back and turn the meeting over to Chairman Slatt. We don't have any comments on items that are not on the agenda. And we are now introducing the first item, which is the Arlington resident study and the state of the commute.
Thank you, Bridget. I'll introduce and turn it over to our presenter. Hi, good evening, commissioners. I'm Eric Balliot with Arlington County Commuter Services, and thank you for having us back to present new transportation research from Mobility Lab, a division of Commuter Services. As you may remember, we were before you in March to share our special analysis of the 2017-2018 COG Regional Travel Survey, which is conducted every 10 years. So tonight we're presenting highlights from the 2021 Arlington Resident Travel Survey. And this report, as you'll see, covers some of the shifts in travel behavior during the COVID pandemic. So now I'd like to introduce Tasha Areza, Mobility Lab's Research Director, who will give tonight's presentation. So take it away, Tasha.
Hi, thanks, Eric, for the introduction. So good evening, everyone. My name is Tasha Areza, and I'm the Research Director of Mobility Lab. So as Eric said, I'm here today to talk about some highlights from our newest research study, which is the 2021 Arlington Resident Travel Survey and Special Analysis Technical Report. Do I show the slides?
Yes, you can share your screen.
Okay, yeah, all right, hold on. All right. Is everyone seeing the slides?
Yep, looks great.
All right, okay, so, yeah. Okay, so all right. So I'll start by talking a little bit about Mobility Lab and the work that we do. So Mobility Lab is a research center and communication source for transportation behavior, policy, and transportation demand management, or TDM for short. So Mobility Lab is a division of ACCS, which is the TDM agency in Arlington County. We're funded by multiple sources, one of which is the Virginia DRPT. So Mobility Lab designs and conducts TDM research for Arlington County, and we have worked with other teams within, such as the Transit Bureau. So we also partner with established research contractors. One example is LDA Consulting, who we actually partnered with for this 2021 Arlington resident study. We also interact with major regional TDM stakeholders, such as COG and Commuter Connections. And we also communicate results and raise awareness and TDM in Arlington through our website and newsletters. So I'll briefly go over the background and the methodology of the report before discussing some of the highlights. So the 2021 Arlington Resident Travel Survey Report is a report about commuting patterns, non-work travel, and the opinions and attitudes around travel of Arlington residents. Given the timing of the study, there's a unique spotlight on trends and conditions prior to and during the COVID-19 pandemic. So data was gathered using an online survey among adult residents of Arlington County. The data collection was conducted between the months of May and July in 2021. So postcards were sent to Arlington households that invited them to answer an online survey. There was also a telephone number that we provided for those who opted to answer the survey over the phone. So this whole survey effort resulted in a random sample of 4,213 Arlington residents. This sample covers both employed and non-employed residents and residents residing in several geographic sub-areas in Arlington, such as Ralston-Ballston Corridor, Route 1, Columbia Pike, and Shirlington. We also looked at the data in terms of population subgroups, so this is based on certain demographic characteristics or travel characteristics. So a new topic for the report is the travel behavior changes prompted by the COVID-19 pandemic. So in the survey, we asked about information regarding telework, as well as information on their current commute, pre-pandemic commute, and what they anticipate their post-pandemic commute to be like. Just to clarify, when we say pre-pandemic commute, this is related to the modes or frequency of use in February 2020, before the pandemic stay-at-home directives were issued. And when we refer to current commute in this report, it was what they were using at the time of the survey, which is between the months of May to July of 2021. So next I'll be discussing some key highlights based on the results and findings of the report. So the first is about demographics. So based on the sample we see that 75% of respondents reported annual household incomes of $100,000 or higher. And then there's also a mix of new and longtime residents in the county. 38% moved to the county within the past 5 years, while 46% of respondents lived in Arlington for 10 years or longer. In terms of car ownership, overall 12% of households are carless. However, we looked at the data more closely, and we saw that there's actually a lower level of car ownership for those in the metro corridors. To illustrate, 23% of households in metro corridors are carless, compared to only 7% for those in the non-metro corridors. So as for work travel, based on the data, we see some changes in the travel behavior. First, there's the rise in telework. So 70% of employed respondents were working from home for at least 3 days per week. Pre-pandemic, 42% did not work from home at all. The second shift we noticed was that the pandemic shifted commute travel from transit to drive alone. For those that still travel to work, the use of non-single occupancy vehicle modes dropped to 15% in 2021 from 55% pre-pandemic. We also see this shift in the chart on the right, which shows the use of different commute modes as a percentage of weekly commute days. So we see that pre-pandemic, which is a time period of February 2020, before the pandemic restrictions were put into place, we see that drive alone, train, bus were the top 3 modes for commuting. But in the midst of the pandemic in 2021, telework became the top mode, followed by drive alone, taxi, ride-hail, that group category. However, we dug into the data a little bit further. If you compared commute travel data from 2015 to 2020, you can see that drive alone actually was decreasing while transit use was increasing. So looking at 2020 versus 2015 data, we saw that drive alone fell to 38% in 2020 compared to 45% in 2015, while train use was actually on the way up to 49% 2020 before COVID-19 restrictions were put into place, to 42% in 2015. So in the report, we also discussed data about non-work travel of Arlington residents. So based on the survey data we collected, we see that drive alone is the most common mode for non-work travel at 74%, followed by walking at 48%, and driving or riding with others at 27%. We analyzed the data a little bit further to see some interesting trends, and we saw that compared to weekdays, on weekends, Arlington residents are more likely to drive alone, to drive or ride with others, or use ride-hail for their non-work travel. So the study also provides data on the level of satisfaction that Arlington residents have with the transportation system. So according to the data, 71% of respondents were satisfied with Arlington's transportation system. This is higher than in 2015 when the last Arlington resident study was conducted, where only 65% were satisfied. When we look closer into the data, the level of satisfaction actually varied depending on the area of residence. So 81% of those who lived in Ralston-Boston corridor were satisfied, compared to only 58% of respondents living in Columbia Pike, for example. And the survey also asked about factors that influence the transportation mode chosen by Arlington residents. So the top 3 factors that influence their mode choice are reliability or predictability of travel time, which was cited by 95% of survey respondents. This was followed by the length of the trip, cited by 91% of respondents. And the third was safety relating to crashes or injury, which was cited by 78% of respondents. Again, we looked at the data a little more closely and found that factors actually differed depending on age. For example, cost was a more important factor for respondents younger than 35 years old, while for older respondents, safety, travel flexibility, and familiarity with mode were the more important factors that they considered when selecting their mode for travel. So the survey also included questions about the level of awareness and use of Arlington residents to travel information and assistance that's available to them in the county. So based on the data, there is a high level of awareness and use of the services. To illustrate, 95% of respondents used at least one travel and trip information app on a digital device. 83% knew of at least one travel information and assistance organization in Arlington. The most popular are the Commuter Store, Bike Arlington, and Walk Arlington. And then we also observed the same high level of awareness for transit and travel options in Arlington. For example, 97% have heard of Capital Bike Share, 95% have heard of scooter services, and 2/3 of respondents in multifamily buildings said that their building offered travel information and assistance services. So for the final highlight, I'll talk about the transportation needs of Arlington residents based on the survey data. So the survey asked about transportation needs in 2 ways. First, it asked what the most important transportation needs or concerns are in Arlington County, which we see the results of in the chart on the left. And second, because of the timing of the survey also asked about transportation services that are more important now than before the pandemic. So generally, the results showed that transit and bike-related items were some of the top transportation needs in both cases. So in general, transit was cited by 48% of respondents as the most important transportation need or concern in Arlington County, followed by 21% who answered bike, while in the other question, walking-related services are now viewed as more important than before the pandemic. So this concludes our short presentation about some top-level highlights from Mobility Lab's latest study, which is the 2021 Arlington Resident Travel Survey. If you would like to read the complete report, it is available for download on our website, which is mobilitylab.org. And I thank you for your time. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. It's very useful information. I definitely hopped in and grabbed the full report. I especially liked the what's your expected commute post-pandemic, and interesting to compare those percentages to where we were in 2019 and in 2020. So thank you. And do any commissioners have questions? If you are a commissioner on virtual, you can raise your virtual hand. And if you're a commissioner in person, you can raise your actual hand. All right, seeing none, thank you very much. I will put in my standard plug to Mobility Lab, which is I would love to see us do a business intercept survey where we ask people who are coming to local Arlington businesses, how did you get here today, to help our business community understand.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, we
Yes.
can't hear you on our end.
Well, I got my microphone on, so I'm not sure. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
Okay,
can again.
there we go. Then I will just put in my standard plug, which is I would love to do an intercept survey, business intercept, where we ask people coming to local Arlington businesses how they got there, to help our business community understand how their customers are arriving, whether transit or bus or walking or biking or whatnot. Would love to see that potentially happen in the future from Mobility Lab. Seeing no other hands, I think we're ready for our next agenda item.
Before I introduce the next agenda item, excuse me, I did not mention Brian Shelton, who is here with us tonight. He is also working as a staff liaison for the Transportation Commission to help us through this transition. So Brian is here as an intern from Virginia Tech with the Master's in Planning, so we are very excited to have him. And as I may have said before, this is our first in-person meeting, so there are some transitions, so please bear with us through that. So with that, I would like to introduce the next agenda item, which is the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority Standard Project Agreement, SPA, for Nova Parks, design of Washington and Old Dominion WNOD trail improvements, and this is an information item.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mr. Chair, it's good to be back in person. For the record, I'm Rich Roisman with the Department of Environmental Services Transportation Division. I am the Regional Program Coordinator. I do not have a slide deck this evening, so hopefully you folks have had a chance to review the draft staff report prior to the meeting. Way back before COVID, in November 2019, this commission heard an item, and then the county board approved a resolution of support for Nova Parks' $5.6 million funding application to the NVTA to design and construct improvements to the Washington Old Dominion Trail between North Roosevelt Street and North Carlin Springs Road. And before I get too much further in, let me pause for a moment and introduce Mike Depew. He is the Nova Parks Planning Administrator, and he is joining the meeting virtually. I saw him up on Teams before. Mike, can you unmute yourself for a moment and just introduce yourself?
I can. Good evening, members of the commission. My name is Mike Depew. I am the planning administrator with Nova Parks, and I'll be here and happy to answer any questions you might have about this very important piece of multimodal infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So the board approved the resolution support. Nova Parks applied to the NVTA for the sum previously mentioned for design and construction, both at the county board item for the resolution support, as well as during the authority's public comment period. Both bodies heard public comment, both in support of and in opposition to Nova Parks' application, the resolution support, and the project as a whole. Ultimately, the NVTA approved $650,000 in design funding only as part of their fiscal 20 to 25 6-year program. There's additional language that was part of the board's resolution of support, providing direction to the county manager, as well as verbal direction provided by the chair at the time of adoption. That's all reflected in the staff report. So the money was approved, and then typically it's for the last 2 years of the 6-year program, fiscal 24 and 25. At Nova Parks' request, county staff on their behalf requested that the NVTA forward appropriate the design funding to fiscal 2023. So once that step takes place and the authority approves their 23 budget, then the clock begins ticking on the requirement to execute a standard project agreement to actually formalize the funds and allow the sponsor to access the funds. Now, as we were before, when the application was put in, we are in a bit of an unusual situation. The Nova Parks is not allowed under state law to apply directly to the authority or to receive authority funds because they are not a statutorily enumerated provider of transportation. They are a parks agency. So anytime they go for something, and this is what happened with the similar project that was completed toward the end of 2021 in Falls Church, the city or county needs to act on Nova Parks' behalf. It is still Nova Parks' project, but we need to act on their behalf in front of the authority. So the county must execute the standard project agreement with NVTA to access the funds. There will be a companion memorandum of agreement between the county and Nova Parks to govern basically oversight review of Nova Parks' invoices to the authority and approval for Nova Parks to pay, for NVTA to pay Nova Parks for the work that's being done. So that's why we have two documents that are going to go in front of the board. And let me also say that the MOA and the standard project agreement were not distributed to the commission because they are under review by the county attorney's office. So I can't distribute that at this time. They will be available when the board report goes out, assuming that everything goes forward smoothly. So with that in mind, and given the guidance from the board at the time of the resolution of support, staff has worked very carefully with our colleagues in DES, particularly in the Office of Sustainability and Environmental Management, as well as with our colleagues in the Department of Parks and Recreation. I briefed the Parks and Rec Commission on Tuesday evening on this same item and got a little bit of feedback from them. We're trying to follow the guidance from the board to be as explicit as possible with what we think makes sense for Nova Parks to do, both in terms of public engagement and the analytical framework that they need to apply in the design process for this trail to balance the transportation needs with the environmental protection of the sensitive areas in and along the trail, including county parkland. So I don't want to go into the specifics necessarily, but the sort of guidance that we provided is outlined in the staff report, as well as in the resolution, which was provided with the report as attachment C. And we're setting up a structure where, assuming the money goes forward and everything is executed, Nova Parks will begin the design process. We expect them to conduct a robust public engagement, including check-ins with this commission, with PRC, probably the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. I know E2C2 has expressed interest as well. All of that is expected to happen as part of the design process. And assuming that the board approves the manager's recommendation here, Nova Parks will need to go back to the board to get endorsement of the major design elements of the trail improvement before the board will consider another resolution of support to go back for construction funding from the NVT. So let me stop there, see if there are any questions from commissioners.
Great, thanks. So I just want to restate to make sure I'm fully understanding this. So in addition to this quite clearly saying to Nova Parks, unless we endorse your major design elements, we're not going to give you support to go to NVTA for money. It's my understanding that without Arlington County, NVTA, Nova Parks literally can't go to NVTA for money.
That is correct.
Like statutorily,
under current state code, they are not authorized to go directly to the authority. They must get the support of whatever jurisdiction they are planning to work in, and that application needs to be sponsored by that jurisdiction to go to the NVTA.
So without county board support, this cannot go forward to get construction money from NVTA.
Not from the NVTA.
Right. They could conceivably build it with their own money or something like that. Okay, great. And yeah, the board report seems pretty clear about the framework here of looking at trail usage and safety and who maintains what and the resource protection areas and all of that. I think it's pretty clear. Do any other commissioners have questions? Commissioner Lantelmi.
So this is just the start to get the legal framework in place in order to move ahead. Is there, at this point, any conceptualization of what would need to be done on this section of the trail?
I will answer myself and then circle back to Mike for his view, but there were very high-level concept plans that staff reviewed and were shown at the time the resolution of support was given back in November of 2019. To my knowledge, those plans have not advanced any further because there hasn't been any money for Nova Parks to spend.
Would this include a bridge over Sycamore Street?
No.
Help resolve that mess there?
No, the actual western project limit is where that sort of stub end of Roosevelt Street comes in on the east side of Sycamore. So it's from east of Sycamore
okay.
over to North Carolina.
Okay, so it's on the east side. So it's not to the Falls Church, to the Falls Church line.
No, it
It's
is
just
not. It does
this
not go through
interior
Danico Park. It is
part.
just, east of there, so.
Okay, got it.
Anecdotal, or not anecdotally, but editorially, the county is involved in a planning study for the Washington Old Dominion Trail Gap, where you're operating on city streets near the East Falls Church Metro Rail Station. So at some point, if there are improvements coming out of that, I expect that will be a joint type of thing between Nova Parks and the county. But that's a separate initiative, separate from what's in front of you this evening.
Good. And sort of editorially, this is fascinating to me because 100 years after the GW Parkway was first conceived as a scenic recreational drive and built by the Park Service, and of course it's now a commuter road for all intents and purposes, we've evolved the same way for bicycles. The trail was originally a recreational trail under NVTA, under the Nova Parks, and now it is clearly evolving into a true transportation corridor. So I think, a century later, we're back to it's sort of back to the future. So anyway, I think this is really fascinating, quite good.
Did Nova Parks planner have anything to add to the answer to that question?
Just to concur that no further study has been done as we are awaiting the money to be able to do that. So the plans that were submitted in 2019, and by plans, I mean very high level conceptual designs, they remain. They remain the latest and greatest.
And is it my recollection that those look fairly similar to what is actually on the ground in Falls Church City, the dual trails?
I would say roughly half of it. There is a large segment that's immediately adjacent to Route 66, pushed right up against the sound wall. And because of that, we don't have the opportunity to really develop true, fully separated lanes with a median in between. In that case, it's simply a wider trail surface. For the other half of the trail, more towards the Carlin Springs end of it, yes, you can go to Falls Church right now and get a little preview.
Great, thanks. Do any other commissioners have questions? I have to look so many places now. Commissioner Ludlow.
Yeah, just one quick question. Can you tell us a little bit more about when the gap study will be completed and what the implications are for the proposal the proposal that's going to the board? Thank you.
Unfortunately, I cannot. I don't have that information off the top of my head. I can consult with the staff person who's working on it and send word back through the chair.
Last I heard, it's not too far in the future. It's this fiscal year or next fiscal year. I don't remember which. But it's just a study. Then there's money and construction and full design, and it's a long pipeline. Anybody else? And this was just an information item, right? You're not looking for endorsement or anything?
I'm not looking for endorsement. If there are comments that the commission wants the board to be aware of as they're considering this, it's the chair's prerogative to take that and turn into a letter that goes to the board. But no, we are not looking for action specifically.
All right, great. Well, I'm very supportive in making sure that we can reduce conflicts on the W&OD in this section as much as possible while being very cognizant of the potential environmental impacts and minimizing those as much as we can. And when the W&OD was built, we didn't treat or try and slow stormwater in any way, shape, or form. So any rebuild would be an opportunity to improve our stormwater performance in this area. So I think it's a potential win-win as long as we do it right. And this looks like a good framework for doing it right to me. I see thumbs up around, but no other hands or microphones. So thank you, Mr. Roisman.
Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes the agenda items for tonight, but I did see that someone else entered the room, and perhaps you are a speaker for an item that's not on the agenda? No, okay.
No, that's a potential new Transportation Commission member who is
okay.
coming to watch a meeting, as we highly encourage them to do.
Awesome. Okay, with that, we are done with the agenda items. Are there any other items we need to discuss?
Just that I think more and more SPRCs are going to be rolling in here. There's a big list on the county website that hasn't fully gone through yet. I know we've got Bingham Center covered, we've got Silver Diner covered, we've got Joyce Motors covered. 2 of those are the same development. We've got Ballston Holiday Inn covered. We've got Crystal Plaza 5 covered. But there's like 3 more on the list, I think, coming down the pike.
There are also LRPCs coming down the pike, including big ones such as Missing Middle, which isn't too transportation oriented, but it is.
Parking.
There's also going to be Plan Langston Boulevard on October 25th for the preliminary concept plan. That's not the final plan, but this commission should be there, and I believe will be interested in that plan. It's already posted, so if anybody's interested, they can go ahead and start looking at it, but that's up there.
Yep, and there is an online engagement open on the Langston Boulevard draft plan, so feel free to
And we do
hop
have
in
other
there.
LRPCs that will be coming up in the coming 3 months, so it is going to be a very busy fall.
Commissioner Terry,
May I ask for some definitions of acronyms?
like what LRPC is and stuff like that? LRPC
The
is-
Long Range Planning Committee. It's basically a standing committee of the Planning Commission.
The fun thing about Planning Commission is they have a bunch of committees that are all committees of the whole. They just go to a bunch of meetings and call them different things. It's super hilarious. Yeah, like they're like, oh, it's a zoning committee meeting. I was like, who's going to be there? The exact same people who are at a normal Planning Commission meeting? Yep, same people. Committee of the whole. It's ridiculous.
So we do now have to do rosters for some of them, depending on the SBRC and the LRPC, that we actually have to have membership on them. So because of the changes in state law to allow hybrid meetings in order to have a quorum. So yeah, there's now these odd mixes for committee. There is actual membership on some of them.
Yeah. All right. Anything else for the good of the commission? People have questions about anything? Did everybody find their way here okay? No one got drywalled into a wall or anything on their way up? All right, great. Our next meeting,
October 26th.
October
7
26th.
p.m., same place.
Same place,
time.
in person, hybrid again.
Just before we conclude, it looks like we have a question on Teams.
Oh,
Yes, it's Biden. Can y'all hear me?
yes, Commissioner Muradovic.
Hey, yeah. So in regards to these long range and short range planning committees, will we be getting an email for the specific projects that you need somebody to volunteer for?
Yep, exactly. I'll send an email.
All right, cool.
Anytime I need somebody. I appreciate the question.
All right, thank you.
All right. Seeing no other hands, I will declare us adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Glad to see everybody.
Bye-bye, everyone.